The morning the sky felt larger, the kitchen smelled like a memory. Cardamom and cumin, simmering meat, the bright citrus tang of freshly squeezed oranges stacked in an old brass bowl. Light came through dusty curtains in golden shards that made the tiny motes hang like confetti. Outside the courtyard a goat bleated once and then again, calling attention as if to say, "This is the day." It was the morning of Eid al-Adha, and even before the city had fully yawned awake, every sound seemed to be in conversation with something older than the houses themselves. I remember standing at the threshold, barefoot on cool stone, and feeling that hush that comes right before a promise is kept. The family moved with a quiet energy, my mother tying her scarf just so, my father walking past carrying the fat-lined cloth that would wrap the sacrificed animal, my younger sister tracing circles on the floor with the tip of her shoe. The house felt full in a way it rarely did. The present pressed up against a long, long story, and that story was in every gesture. People kept touching the old wooden table that had lived through dozens of Eids, as if by touching it, they could steady the chain that linked their hands to something their grandparents had felt. "Tell it again," my sister said to Mother, eyes wide the way they always were when she wanted to be moved. The one about Ibrahim and the dream. And so, because it was Eid, and because certain stories are as essential as water at certain moments, Mother obliged. She didn't begin with dates or dry facts. She began with a man who had the courage to listen. There are many names for him. Prophet Ibrahim. Abraham to Jews and Christians. Someone called by God and chosen to speak truth in a time when truth was hidden under pots and idols. The smallness of clay statues had taken over hearts and homes, and people had grown used to asking carved stone for what only the living could give. Ibrahim could not accept that. He saw the emptiness in the things people worshipped and felt in his chest, a different kind of hunger, for one God, for meaning, for obedience. Mother's voice smoothed the edges of the past into something intimate. Ibrahim left his people to follow that call, she said. He trusted, even when the road was unclear. When she spoke of Hajar and the infant Ismail, she spoke softly, with a reverence that made the names glow. They walked across deserts, an exodus of the heart. They built a place of prayer together, set stones in place with hands that trembled with hope. The Kaaba rose into being like a promise kept between earth and sky. And somewhere along the way, the small household learned to listen for the voice that sometimes arrives in dreams. Dreams in that old story are not idle visions. They are covenant points, maps that direct the soul. One night Ibrahim dreamed he was commanded to sacrifice his son. He woke as a man who had to reconcile two truths, the voice of God and the love a father carries. He did what many of us cannot even imagine. He told his son, he told Ismail, and he put trust in the shape of their conversation. Ismail, older now and wise beyond tender years, replied with a grace that sounded like surrender, but was something higher. Consent. The father's willingness and the son's assent formed the spine of the tale. Obedience, in that moment, became something that contained both sorrow and liberation. Mother paused and looked at all of us. The children clustered at her knees, the uncles who had arrived overnight, the cousins quietly eating sweet pastries on the edge of conversation. "No one thinks about the darkness that must have come with that morning," she said. "Obedience doesn't mean you don't feel. It means that even with fear, you step forward." As she spoke, my mind saw the scene like a painting. Ibrahim leading his son to the place where the sacrifice would be made, Ismail's face washed in dawn light, the silence of the world made loud, because everyone knew that something was being given up and something else would be returned. Right when the blade was about to fall, when the heart of the story hung ready to break, God provides. A ram appears, a substitute offered not because God needs blood, but because the test needed completion and the lesson was in the willingness to obey. The act became a sign. True faith includes the readiness to place the deepest love in God's hands. It is this very completeness, love, trust, obedience, mercy, that Eid al-Adha names. We do not celebrate harm. We celebrate the human ability to submit the self to the divine with full consciousness. We remember that God is merciful, that the world is not left in despair, but given a chance to be generous. Mother's retelling always brightened when she reached the part about the crowd that gathered after the sacrifice. They did not turn inward. They shared. The meat was divided, some eaten by the family, some given to friends, and a generous portion sent to those who were poor or alone. She said it like a recipe and like a prayer. Sharing is the echo of that first obedience, she told us. It transforms the test into blessing. Outside, the city began to peel awake and join our small household's hymn. Men moved toward the mosque in crisp clothes. Children ran past carrying strings of dates, and everywhere there was a measured joy, sound that did not boast but inhabited bones like a familiar garment. Preparations were careful. The animal, purchased in the days before Eid, had been kept with attention and kindness. In our tradition, the act of sacrifice is never an excuse for cruelty. There are rules and respect, and even the animal is treated with gentleness until the end. We had in our street a man trained in the old ways. He spoke quietly to the animals, and they listened as if they understood that this was not cruelty, but part of a ritual that set them in a place of honor before they would become food for the needy. As the sun climbed, our family set out for the Eid prayer. The mosque courtyard filled like a bowl of many-colored stones. People from different walks of life, some from across the sea, some who had only recently come to the neighborhood. Everyone's breath condensed in short puffs of excitement. There was a hum of greeting, the murmur of blessings exchanged, the small rituals that make a community a living thing. An elder offering a prayer for a neighbor's child, a stranger folding his hands to show his respect. The line between the past and present blurred. The story of Ibrahim walked beside us like a guardian. I found myself thinking about the two kinds of sacrifice we perform, the visible and the hidden. The visible is easy to name, the animal, the prayer, the public declarations. The hidden sacrifices are quieter, the small daily renunciations of selfishness, the decision to feed someone before you feed yourself, the courage to speak truth in a place where convenience whispers otherwise. Eid al-Adha gives us permission to place both kinds inside one large frame, the act of obedience that is as much about our hearts as about our hands. Back at home, when the prayers concluded and laughter filled the air like a new kind of music, we returned to the courtyard to make the arrangements. Aunts and cousins took up knives with skilled hands. The meat was cut into portions, carefully packed into clean containers, labeled for neighbors, friends, and those who seldom had visitors. There was a rhythm to it, almost musical. The sound of the knife, the burr of wrapping paper, the soft instructions passed from one person to another. Even the youngest children had a role, to carry a packet to a nearby apartment, to press a folded note of blessing into an envelope for the old man down the lane. A man with a thin, weathered face arrived, Uncle Hamid, who had not come last year due to illness. He had a habit of saying little, but watching a lot. He placed his hand on the smallest container, as if to feel the warmth that still lingered. "It's not just food," he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. "It's a bridge." He thought of the families across the city who would open those packages and be reminded that they belonged to something larger than loneliness. He thought of mouths that would be fed, of children whose small faces would shine with the knowledge that someone remembered them. Eid is always a pattern of farewells and arrivals. Men sweep the street corners with their eyes, searching for someone to greet, someone they may have neglected. Children race with sticky hands from door to door, collecting hugs and sweets. There is a balance at work, joy braided with compassion, because the holiday is not complete unless generosity circulates like a tide. It is easy to mistake the holiday for a day of family and food alone, but that would miss the heart. The story of Ibrahim insists that the true measure of sacrifice is how it expands the circle of care. Later that afternoon, when heat softened the stone and chatter turned into slower, more contemplative conversation, I found a quiet corner and thought about the phrase people use so lightly, sacrifice. In market stalls and in headline news, it becomes a convenient metaphor. Someone sacrificed a career. A nation made sacrifices. Yet the rite we keep today springs from something more intimate and precise. In the original moment, sacrifice was not an act of violence for its own sake, nor a display of domination. It was a conscious surrender of a beloved thing to honor a promise made to God. The substituted ram was a mercy. God neither asked for cruelty nor measured devotion by pain alone. The story recalibrates us. Sacrifice is to be used to share, to relieve, to restore. That evening, as dusk framed the city and lanterns blinked awake, our family gathered to eat. People spoke of the day's prayers, of the faces they had seen. Laughter rose and fell like a chorus of tides. Mother ladled a fragrant stew into bowls and handed them to those waiting. Across from me, my cousin Sammy carved pieces of meat with the same care as someone arranging a bouquet. He had tears in his eyes, and when I looked over he shrugged as if to say, "It always gets me." Emotion was allowed at this table. It was welcomed. There was a sanctity to the moment that words could not fully hold. When we later walked the streets to drop off the last of the parcels, I watched windows open and faces appear, some surprised to see us, some who had been expecting the visit, others who rushed to the door to bow in gratitude. The exchanges were brief and real. "May you be blessed. Peace be upon you. We will pray for you." No one measured contributions. Everything was received as if it were a gift from the same generous hand. At the edge of the neighborhood, an old woman who had once been a storyteller, her voice now thin with age, sat on a bench and took our packet with careful hands. We lingered a moment to ask after her. "Come sit," she said, and in her voice there was a thread of the same story we had heard earlier. She recounted, in the patched voice of many seasons, how her father had taught her to save a portion of every meal for someone else. "It keeps the heart from hollowing," she said, and when she spoke the words, everyone felt the truth of them. She named the sacrifice not as loss, but as a steadying force. That night, when the house quieted and the city softened into sleep, I lay awake thinking about the morning's images, the ram, the courtyard, the procession of people carrying bowls and blessings. I thought about how a single story could shape the way a whole community breathes. Eid al-Adha is more than a calendar date. It is a practice, a set of limbs we use to walk toward compassion. It asks us to test our love by giving it away and to meet obedience with mercy. Before I fell asleep, I wrote one small thing in the margins of my mind. In a world that constantly asks us to build walls between tribes, among nations, within our own hearts, Eid calls us to build bridges. Every parcel we wrapped, every prayer we folded into our mouths, and every moment we chose generosity over comfort was a stone laid toward a wider, kinder world. That night the sky felt larger, as if it had been pulled gently aside to make room for everything we remembered and everything we hoped. Tomorrow, we would carry on, work would resume, children would return to school, but the morning had changed us. For a few hours at least we had lived in the story, and by living it, learned how to turn private devotion into public mercy. The sacrifice had been done, the meat had been divided, and the most important work, the work of the heart, would continue quietly, one act at a time. The meaning behind Eid al-Adha, the morning of Eid al-Adha, always begins with a feeling of excitement mixed with peace. Families rise early, dress in their best clothes, and prepare themselves for the special prayer that marks the beginning of this sacred day. The streets slowly fill with people greeting one another with warm smiles and blessings. Children carry balloons and sweets, while elders exchange heartfelt words of peace. For many, this day is not just about celebration, but about remembering a story that carries one of the deepest lessons of faith. At the center of Eid al-Adha lies the story of Prophet Ibrahim and his son Ismail. It is a story of faith, trust, and obedience to God. Long ago, Prophet Ibrahim saw a dream that felt more real than anything he had ever experienced. In this dream, God commanded him to sacrifice his beloved son, Ismail. This was not a simple dream to ignore. For prophets, dreams often hold divine instructions. Prophet Ibrahim woke with a heart that was heavy but filled with determination to fulfill the command of his Creator. When he spoke to his son about the dream, the response of Ismail was extraordinary. Instead of resisting or questioning, the young son accepted the command with patience and courage. He told his father to do what God had asked and that he too would remain steadfast. This moment of trust between father and son became one of the greatest examples of submission to the will of God. It was not only Ibrahim who was being tested, but also his son, who showed complete willingness to obey. As they walked toward the place of sacrifice, both father and son carried hearts that were heavy, yet filled with faith. Ibrahim prepared himself for the hardest act of his life, but he trusted the wisdom of God. Just as he was about to fulfill the command, God, in his infinite mercy, intervened. A ram was sent down to be sacrificed in place of Ismail. The test was complete, and both father and son had proven their obedience. The sacrifice of the ram became a symbol of devotion, mercy, and submission to God's will. This is the story that Muslims around the world remember every year during Eid al-Adha. It is not about the meat or the act of slaughter itself, but about the spirit of sacrifice and the willingness to give up what is most beloved for the sake of God. The ritual of sacrifice reminds every believer of the deeper meaning of faith. It teaches that true devotion is shown not only in words, but in actions, and in the readiness to place God above all else. On this day, families gather to sacrifice an animal such as a goat, sheep, cow, or camel. The meat is then divided into 3 parts. One part is kept for the family, another part is shared with relatives and friends, and the third part is given to the poor and needy. This act ensures that the blessing of Eid reaches every home, especially those who struggle with hunger. It is a reminder that faith is not just about worship, but about compassion, generosity, and care for others. In many communities, the day begins with the Eid prayer held in open fields or large mosques. The rows of worshippers standing shoulder to shoulder symbolize unity and equality before God. People wear their best clothes, exchange greetings, and embrace one another with love. The spirit of joy spreads across homes and streets, yet beneath the celebration lies the memory of the story of Ibrahim and Ismail. It is this story that gives meaning to every act of kindness and every sacrifice made on this day. Eid al-Adha is more than just a festival. It is a lesson passed down through generations. It reminds every believer that life is filled with tests, and that true faith is shown when one is ready to give up personal desires for the sake of what is right. The sacrifice is not simply about animals. It is about sacrificing arrogance, selfishness, and greed. It is about becoming humble, grateful, and mindful of others. This is why Eid al-Adha is often called the festival of sacrifice. As the sun sets on the first day of Eid, families sit together to share meals, laughter, and stories. Children run with joy, elders share wisdom, and neighbors exchange gifts. Yet the essence of the day remains the same: to remember the powerful story behind the Muslim sacrifice, to honor the obedience of Prophet Ibrahim and his son, and to carry forward the lessons of faith, patience, and compassion, the spirit of sacrifice in everyday life after the Eid prayer and the sacrifice. The story of Prophet Ibrahim and Ismail continues to live in the daily lives of Muslims. The act of giving up something beloved is not limited to one day of the year. Instead, it becomes a lesson that can be applied to every moment of life. When we speak of sacrifice, it does not always mean an animal or wealth. Sometimes it means giving up pride, ego, or selfish desires for the sake of peace and goodness. Sacrifice in Islam is a reminder that our lives are a trust from God. Just as Prophet Ibrahim was ready to offer his son, Believers are taught to place their love for God above all worldly attachments. This does not mean that one cannot love family, wealth, or success. Rather, it means that these loves should never outweigh obedience to God. The true lesson of Eid al-Adha is that faith must guide our choices, even when those choices are difficult. In daily life, sacrifice appears in small but powerful ways. A mother sacrifices her comfort to care for her children. A father sacrifices his sleep to provide for his family. A student sacrifices time with friends to focus on education. A neighbor sacrifices personal ease to help another in need. These acts, though they may not be as dramatic as Ibrahim's test, carry the same spirit of devotion and compassion. Each small sacrifice builds character and strengthens the bond between people and their Creator. Eid al-Adha also emphasizes the importance of sharing. The meat of the sacrificed animal is divided so that everyone, rich or poor, can take part in the blessings of the day. This act is more than charity. It is a declaration that the community is one body. When one member suffers, the whole community feels the pain. When one member rejoices, the joy is shared by all. The division of the meat is a physical symbol of unity, showing that no one should be left hungry or forgotten on this sacred day. In many places around the world, the days of Eid are filled with acts of kindness. Volunteers visit hospitals to share food with patients. Families deliver packages of meat to orphanages and shelters. Neighbors who may not have spoken for months come together to exchange greetings and gifts. These actions bring to life the lessons of Eid al-Adha. They show that faith is not just about prayer, but about creating mercy and kindness wherever one goes. The story of Ibrahim also teaches courage. It takes courage to obey God when the command seems difficult. It takes courage to place trust in God when the path ahead is uncertain. Ibrahim's willingness to sacrifice his son is remembered not because of the act itself, but because of the strength it took to follow through. Earned life courage may appear in different forms. It might be the courage to speak the truth when lies are easier. It might be the courage to give up dishonest gain for the sake of honesty. It might be the courage to remain patient in hardship and grateful in times of ease. Every believer is tested in different ways, and each test is a chance to show obedience and trust. Another lesson of Eid al-Adha is mercy. Just as God replaced Ismail with a ram, showing mercy to both father and son, believers are reminded to show mercy in their own lives. Mercy toward family, mercy toward neighbors, mercy toward animals, and mercy toward the earth. Sacrifice is not cruelty. It is guided by compassion. This is why the rules of sacrifice in Islam are clear. The animal must be treated with respect, fed well and cared for until the moment of sacrifice. The process itself must be done quickly and humanely, minimizing suffering. In this way, even the act of sacrifice carries within it the value of mercy. Eid al-Adha also connects Muslims to the wider history of faith. The story of Abraham is not only in Islam, but also in Judaism and Christianity. This shared story creates a bridge between different communities, reminding us that obedience, faith, and sacrifice are universal values. Though traditions may differ, the core message is the same. True devotion to God requires trust, surrender, and compassion. When the days of Eid come to an end, the lessons remain. The sacrifice reminds us to let go of arrogance and selfishness. It teaches us to purify our hearts and to remember those less fortunate. It encourages us to live with humility and gratitude. Just as Ibrahim was tested, each believer faces tests in life. Some tests are small, others are great, but all of them carry the opportunity to prove faith through patience and action. In homes across the world, Eid al-Adha leaves behind not just the memory of prayers and meals, but a renewed sense of purpose. Families sit together to reflect on their blessings, to ask forgiveness from one another, and to set intentions for the year ahead. Children learn that sacrifice is not a loss, but a gift that brings greater blessings. Elders remind the young that the story of Ibrahim is not a story of the past, but a guide for the present and the future. The power of Eid al-Adha lies in its ability to transform hearts. It calls people to rise above selfishness and to live for something greater than themselves. It teaches that true happiness is found not in holding on, but in giving away. It is a festival of obedience, mercy, courage, and compassion. The story of the Muslim sacrifice continues to inspire because it speaks to the deepest part of human nature, the desire to live with meaning, to trust in God, and to share goodness with the world. The global celebration of Eid al-Adha is not only a story of faith and sacrifice, but also a celebration that unites millions of Muslims around the world. From the deserts of Arabia to the bustling cities of Asia, Africa, Europe, and America, the spirit of this day crosses borders, languages, and cultures. Everywhere it is celebrated, the same story of Prophet Ibrahim and Ismail is remembered. Yet each community adds its own unique colors and traditions to the festival. In Saudi Arabia, the celebration carries a special connection because it is the land where the Kaaba stands, the very place built by Prophet Ibrahim and his son Ismail. During Eid al-Adha, millions of pilgrims gather in Mecca for Hajj, one of the 5 pillars of Islam. On the day of Eid, pilgrims stand at Mount Arafat in prayer and reflection, following the footsteps of Ibrahim. For those who cannot perform Hajj, the day still connects them spiritually to Makkah, as every prayer and sacrifice reminds them of the same history. In South Asia, countries like Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh fill with the sounds of markets alive with buyers and sellers in the days leading up to Eid. Families choose animals with care, often involving children in the process to teach them the meaning of sacrifice. Streets and courtyards echo with greetings of Eid Mubarak, and after the sacrifice, meat is shared generously with neighbors and the poor. Houses smell of freshly cooked meals, while mosques overflow with worshippers in colorful clothes. The joy is communal, and no one is left behind. In African countries, Eid al-Adha carries the same devotion, but often with a blend of local traditions. In Nigeria, for example, families gather in large numbers, sharing not only meat but also rice dishes and sweet drinks. In Egypt, the morning prayer is held in open squares, with thousands raising their hands in unison. In Morocco, narrow streets fill with the aroma of spices and grilled meat, while children wear new clothes and play freely. The message is always the same, but the celebrations reflect the rich diversity of cultures. In Western countries, Muslims celebrate Eid al-Adha with equal passion, even though they live as minorities. In the United States, Canada, and Europe, Muslims often rent large halls or use community centers for Eid prayers. Afterward, families gather for meals, and many communities organize charity drives to share food with those in need, regardless of religion. For children growing up in these places, Eid is both a connection to their heritage and an opportunity to share their faith with friends and neighbors. Many invite non-Muslims to their homes, turning Eid into a bridge of understanding. What makes Eid al-Adha truly special is that it is not limited to one nation, language, or culture. It is a global reminder that faith unites hearts. Whether in a small village or a large city, the day carries the same spirit of devotion and generosity. Every Muslim, wherever they are, feels connected to the story of Ibrahim, as if standing beside him in his moment of trial. The lessons of Eid al-Adha also influence how communities interact with one another. The emphasis on sharing meat with the poor ensures that the blessings of the day extend beyond one's own family. It builds bridges between the rich and the needy, reminding everyone that wealth is a trust from God and must be used to care for others. This sense of responsibility strengthens the bonds of community and creates an atmosphere where compassion thrives. In addition to food, the day is also marked by prayer and remembrance. Sermons delivered during the Eid prayer often focus on the meaning of sacrifice and the importance of following God's commands. Scholars remind the community that just as Ibrahim was tested, every believer will face moments of trial. These sermons inspire people to remain strong in faith, to be patient in hardships, and to live with sincerity. The joy of Eid is not only in rituals, but also in the way it brings people closer. Families that may not see each other regularly come together. Cousins play in courtyards, and elders share stories of past generations. In many cultures, it is a time to resolve conflicts, to forgive, and to rebuild relationships. The holiday becomes a fresh beginning, filled with hope and unity. Beyond the celebration, Eid al-Adha carries an important social message. It teaches that faith must lead to action. Sacrifice is not only about animals, it is about sacrificing selfishness, greed, and pride. It's about putting the needs of others before one's own desires. By giving to the poor, helping neighbors, and caring for the community, Muslims show that the true spirit of Eid is compassion in action. As night falls on the day of Eid, cities and villages grow quiet, but the lessons remain. The prayers, the sacrifices, the meals, and the gatherings all leave behind a deeper understanding of what it means to live with faith. For some, the day is a reminder of family bonds. For others, it is a call to serve their community. For all, it is a celebration of God's mercy and the power of obedience. Eid al-Adha is more than just a festival marked on the calendar. It is a living tradition that renews itself every year in the hearts of millions. It connects the past to the present, the individual to the community, and the believer to the Creator. It is a day when faith is not only spoken but lived, when mercy is not only preached but practiced, and when the story of Prophet Ibrahim becomes a guide for every generation. The lasting lessons of Eid al-Adha does not end when the prayers are finished or when the meals are shared. Its meaning continues long after the day itself. It is a festival that leaves behind lessons meant to guide believers throughout their lives. The story of Prophet Ibrahim and his son Ismail is not only a story of the past, but a reminder of how faith must shape the choices we make in every generation. The first lesson of Eid al-Adha is obedience to God. Prophet Ibrahim was ready to give up what was most precious to him because he trusted that God's wisdom is greater than human understanding. This teaches that faith is not only about words, but about action. True obedience means placing trust in God even when the path ahead seems difficult. In life, everyone faces moments when they must choose between their own desires and what is right. It reminds us that choosing God always leads to mercy and blessing. The second lesson is patience. The test of Ibrahim and Ismail was not a simple one. It required strength of heart, courage, and patience. In our daily lives, patience is needed in times of hardship, when prayers are delayed, or when challenges seem overwhelming. Eid al-Adha teaches that patience is not weakness, but a form of strength. Just as God rewarded the patience of Ibrahim and his son, believers are reminded that patience always brings reward in the end. The third lesson is generosity. The sacrifice of animals during Eid is not an act of waste, but of sharing. By dividing the meat into 3 parts, one for the family, one for relatives and friends, and one for the poor, the festival ensures that everyone can taste the blessings of the day. This practice shows that true faith is not selfish. It is about giving to others and caring for those in need. Generosity is a sign of gratitude, and Eid al-Adha teaches that wealth only gains value when it is shared. The fourth lesson is unity. On the morning of Eid, Muslims stand side by side in prayer, rich and poor, young and old, people of every background. This unity reflects the message of Islam that all are equal before God. Eid al-Adha strengthens the bonds of community by encouraging forgiveness, kindness, and compassion. Families reconcile after disputes, neighbors share meals, and strangers greet each other with warmth. The spirit of unity is one of the greatest gifts of Eid. The fifth lesson is mercy. God did not take the life of Ismail, but instead sent a ram as a substitute. This act of mercy shows that God does not desire hardship for his servants, but wishes to test their sincerity. From this, believers learn to show mercy in their own lives. Mercy toward children, mercy toward parents, mercy toward the poor, and even mercy toward animals. Eid al-Adha teaches that sacrifice must always be balanced with compassion. Finally, the most important lesson is that of sacrifice itself. Sacrifice in Islam is not limited to animals. It is about giving up anything that distracts the heart from God. It may be pride, greed, or selfishness. It may be wealth that could be better used to help others. It may be time that could be spent serving family or community. Every believer is called to look within and ask what they can give up for the sake of God. This is the true spirit of sacrifice that Eid al-Adha celebrates. As families return to their daily routines after Eid, the memory of the celebration remains alive. The prayers, the meals, the greetings, and the acts of charity leave a mark on the heart. Children remember the joy of giving, elders remember the blessings of unity, and communities remember the strength of compassion. The story of Ibrahim becomes a guiding light, reminding everyone that faith is lived through action, trust, and love. Eid al-Adha is not only for Muslims, but also a message for all humanity. It teaches that true devotion to God requires trust and obedience. It shows that sacrifice and generosity bring communities together. It reminds the world that mercy is greater than cruelty and that unity is stronger than division. These lessons are timeless, and they carry hope for a better future. The powerful story behind the Muslim sacrifice continues to inspire hearts in every corner of the world. Each year, as believers gather to celebrate Eid al-Adha, they renew their commitment to faith, to family, and to community. They remember Ibrahim's courage, Ismail's patience, and God's mercy. They carry these lessons into their lives, striving to live with sincerity, humility, and compassion. In this way, Eid al-Adha is more than a festival. It is a reminder of who we are, why we believe, and how we must live. It is a celebration that calls us to sacrifice what is selfish and to embrace what is good. It is a story that began thousands of years ago but continues to shape lives today. And it is a promise that as long as we hold on to faith, God's mercy will always be near.